October had always cast a spell over me, wrapping me in a blanket of nostalgia and excitement. The world transformed in this month. Crisp air replaced the sweltering heat of summer, and vibrant hues of orange and red danced across the trees, creating a picturesque landscape. The sweet scent of pumpkin spice mingled with the earthy aroma of fallen leaves, pulling me into a euphoric state. Halloween was my favorite holiday, a time when I could embrace the spooky vibes that seemed to echo my own fascination with the supernatural. Each year, I went all out for Halloween, and this year was no different. The local fall festival was in full swing, and I had no intention of missing it. Our small town transformed into a hub of wholesome fun, hayrides, homemade pies, and children running around in an array of colorful costumes created a scene straight out of a postcard. I always attended these events solo. My friends didn't share my fervor for the season, and I found solace in experiencing the festival alone. Wandering through the festival, sipping hot chocolate from a paper cup, I felt a comforting sense of freedom. As I walked among the bustling booths, my senses heightened. Laughter echoed around me, mingling with the sizzling sounds from food stalls. The chatter of families and children brought warmth to the chilly air, and I let myself get lost in the vibrant chaos. Everything felt just right, until my gaze landed on him. At the entrance stood a man who seemed to be out of place in this joyful atmosphere. He appeared rough around the edges, his clothes worn and dirty, as if he had braved the elements for days without shelter. At first I tried to ignore him, telling myself that in a festival this lively, it was common to see a few odd characters. But something about the way he stood there, eyes scanning the crowd with an intensity that felt almost predatory, struck a chord of unease deep within me. He wasn't actively watching anyone. It was as if he was waiting for something or someone. My heart began to race, and I felt a chill creep down my spine. I brushed off the sensation, convincing myself I was just being paranoid, but the uneasy feeling lingered, tugging at my thoughts as I wandered deeper into the festival. For an hour, I immersed myself in the sights and sounds around me, reveling in the craft booths and the jubilant sounds of children playing games. Yet, every so often I would catch a glimpse of him, always in the same spot, his presence like a shadow lurking at the edge of my peripheral vision. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows that danced on the ground, I began to feel weary. With a sigh, I decided to head home. As I approached the exit, I turned to glance at the man one last time. To my relief, he was gone. The weight that had settled on my shoulders lifted, and I felt a surge of comfort as I walked away from the festival. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of wood smoke and cider, allowing myself to relax. The cool evening air wrapped around me like a comforting shawl, but as I made my way home, I couldn't shake the lingering feeling of dread that accompanied my relief. I arrived home just after dark, locking the door behind me with a sense of security that quickly faded. My small house, located on the edge of town, was old but filled with warmth. After making a cup of tea, I curled up on the couch under a soft blanket, letting the familiar creaks of the old house soothe my nerves. But as I began to unwind, the strange sensation returned, creeping back into my mind. It was an unsettling feeling, as if invisible eyes were piercing through the walls, observing my every move. I glanced around, trying to shake off the sense of being watched. Was I still on edge from the encounter with that man? I made sure the windows were locked and pulled the blinds tight, attempting to ward off the unease. Yet the feeling persisted, wrapping around me like a thick fog. Then I heard it. A soft sound outside. At first, it was too faint to identify, but then it registered. Footsteps on gravel. My heart leaped into my throat, pounding as adrenaline surged through my veins. I turned off the TV, my heart racing, straining to listen. The sound was unmistakable. Someone was outside. Gripped with fear, I crept toward the front window, phone clutched tightly in my hand. As I slowly pulled back the curtain, I froze. There he was, the man from the festival, standing right outside my door. My breath hitched in my throat as I took in his appearance. He wasn't moving, just standing there, staring into the distance with a vacant expression that made my skin crawl. A shiver ran down my spine, paralyzing me. My instinct screamed at me to call the police, but the thought of him noticing made me hesitate. Suddenly, he turned his head, locking eyes with mine through the window. Panic surged within me. and I dropped the curtain, backing away from the window, my heart pounding in my ears. I grabbed my phone, hands trembling as I dialed 911, whispering to the operator that someone was outside my house. They assured me that a unit would be dispatched immediately, but as I hung up, the silence enveloped me like a suffocating blanket. Seconds felt like hours as I stood frozen in the darkness, listening intently for any sound. The silence was deafening, and my mind raced with thoughts of what could happen next. Then, just like that, it was as if he vanished into thin air. The police arrived quickly, their flashing lights casting an eerie glow on my front yard. They searched the area, but after a few minutes, they returned empty-handed, saying they didn't find anyone. They reassured me that I probably scared him off with my call and offered to patrol my street throughout the night. I nodded, grateful for their presence, but unable to shake the feeling of dread that clung to me. As they left, I could feel the fear wrap around me again, squeezing my heart with its icy grip. That night, sleep eluded me. The darkness felt thicker, more oppressive than usual, and I lay wide awake, listening for any sign of movement outside. The next morning, I tried to convince myself that the man was just a random stranger, someone who wandered too close to my home out of curiosity. But when I stepped outside to check my porch, I found no footprints, no evidence that anyone had been there at all. The absence of signs only deepened my anxiety, turning my rational thoughts into a swirling mass of fear and paranoia. As the days turned into weeks, the unsettling feeling of being watched became a nightly ritual. Each evening, as I sank into the couch, a familiar tension gripped me, as if invisible eyes were tracing my every movement. It was a maddening cycle, one that I couldn't escape. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I would hear the faint sound of footsteps on the gravel outside, sending chills racing down my spine. Last night, though, was the breaking point. I was jolted awake by a distinct knock at the door. My heart dropped into my stomach as I held my breath, listening intently for any further sound. The knock came again, firm and deliberate. Fear paralyzed me. I couldn't bring myself to move. I refused to answer, my mind racing with thoughts of what lay beyond that door. Would it be him? As the minutes passed, I felt trapped in my own home, a prisoner to my fear. I had become a ghost of myself, consumed by paranoia and dread. The shadows in my house seemed to stretch longer, darkening the corners and amplifying every creak and whisper. I could only hope that the man from the festival would remain a specter of my imagination, but as Halloween approached once again, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, waiting. With the night closing in, I sat on my couch, wrapped in the blanket that had once brought me comfort. But now it felt heavy, suffocating me with memories of the past weeks. My heart raced with each sound, the wind rustling outside, the leaves scraping against the porch. The world outside felt foreign and threatening. I glanced at the clock, noting the time creeping closer to midnight. As I sat there, staring into the darkness, I knew I had to confront my fears. I had to know if he was out there. Gripping my phone, I steeled myself and moved toward the front window. The curtains were still drawn, but my resolve pushed me to pull them back just enough to peer outside. My breath caught in my throat as I scanned the darkness beyond the glass. For a moment, I saw nothing, but then there he was, standing just beyond the edge of my porch light. The same rough appearance, the same vacant stare. My heart raced, and I felt the weight of fear pressing down on me. He was waiting for something, or someone. My heart pounded as I fought the urge to scream, to flee to the safety of the other room. Suddenly, he turned his head, his gaze locking onto mine once more. My breath hitched as I stumbled back from the window, heart racing, the icy grip of fear wrapping tighter around me. I could hardly think as panic surged through my veins. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, a world where logic no longer held any power. With trembling hands, I dialed 911 again, whispering urgently to the operator. But this time, my voice cracked, the fear bubbling to the surface. "He's back. Please hurry," I begged, my heart pounding in my chest as I backed away from the window, trying to gather my thoughts. The operator assured me help was on the way, but I barely heard her words over the pounding of my heart. All I could focus on was the figure outside, unmoving and unwavering. As I stumbled back into the shadows of my living room, I fought the overwhelming urge to flee, but the fear rooted me to the spot. The air felt thick, suffocating, and every creak of the house echoed like a warning bell. Time blurred into a hazy, terrifying limbo. I sat on the edge of my couch, staring at the door, waiting for the police to arrive, praying they would come before something happened. My breath quickened as I glanced at the clock. The seconds felt like hours, and just as panic began to choke me, I heard the unmistakable sound of sirens in the distance. Relief flooded through me, but it was quickly overshadowed by dread. I could hear the officers knocking on my door, their voices muffled but clear. "Ma'am, are you okay? Open up." Their tone was authoritative yet tinged with concern. I rushed to the door, fumbling with the lock, nearly dropping my phone in my haste. As I swung the door open, the flood of light from the porch illuminated the darkness behind me. "Where is he?" one of the officers demanded, scanning the street. I turned to point outside, but to my horror, the man was gone. "He was just there," I exclaimed, panic creeping back into my voice. "I swear, he was waiting right outside." The officers exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from concern to skepticism. "Are you sure you saw someone?" the second officer asked, stepping closer, his brow furrowed in disbelief. "It's Halloween. People are playing pranks. You might have just imagined it." I shook my head violently, desperation bubbling to the surface. "No, I'm not imagining it. He's been watching me for weeks." I felt tears prick my eyes as the weight of my fear threatened to consume me. "Please, you have to believe me." The officers maintained their skeptical expressions but promised to patrol the area. They assured me that if anyone was lurking around, they would find him. As they walked back outside, I felt a mix of gratitude and frustration. They were trying to help, but their disbelief only deepened my sense of isolation. I locked the door behind them and stood in the silence of my home, listening to their footsteps fade into the distance. With the police gone, I returned to the living room, feeling the weight of the night settle around me again. I sank into the couch, wrapping my arms tightly around myself. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, creeping across the walls like dark tendrils seeking to ensnare me. I could still feel his gaze, the oppressive weight of his presence lingering in the air. As I stared into the darkness, my mind began to race. What if he was still out there, waiting for me to let my guard down? Suddenly, a sound broke through the stillness, a faint scratching at my back door. My heart leaped into my throat, and I froze. There was no mistaking it. Someone was trying to get in. The scratching grew more insistent, a deliberate sound that sent shivers down my spine. I felt trapped in a nightmare as I clutched my phone tightly, knowing I had to act fast. Fighting against the paralyzing fear, I tiptoed toward the back of the house, trying to stifle the sound of my heartbeat echoing in my ears. Each step felt like a mile as I crept toward the source of the noise. I dared to glance out the small window near the door, my breath hitching as I peered into the darkness. And there he was, the man from the festival, his face shrouded in shadow. He stood just beyond the threshold, hands pressed against the glass, staring directly at me. My heart raced, and I felt the air grow thick with dread. The icy grip of terror seized me, and I stumbled back, crashing into a chair as my mind reeled. "Go away," I shouted, my voice trembling, but the words felt feeble, lost in the suffocating darkness. He didn't move, just stared, as if he were trying to see right through me. My phone buzzed in my hand, and for a moment, I thought it was the police calling back. But when I looked, it was just a message from my best friend, asking if I wanted to join her at a party. I wanted to scream, to tell her everything, but I was paralyzed, caught in a web of fear and disbelief. Suddenly, I realized he was trying to get me to come to him. He wanted me to open the door. Then, just as quickly as he appeared, he stepped back into the darkness, disappearing from view. I felt a momentary sense of relief, but it was short-lived. I could still feel the dread clawing at my insides, the gnawing certainty that he would return. Desperate for distraction, I hurried to the living room and turned on all the lights, flicking on lamps and checking windows as if light could ward off the darkness. My phone buzzed again, but this time it was a notification from a social media app. A post from the town's festival page caught my eye. "Halloween Haunt, best costume contest tonight. Prize for the scariest costume." A sickening thought washed over me. What if he was still trying to play with me? What if he was out there watching, waiting for me to let my guard down? Just as I contemplated this, The lights flickered and dimmed, the house falling into an eerie twilight. Panic surged through me, and I rushed to check the fuse box. As I turned away from the door, I caught a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye. A shadow darting past the window. My heart dropped. "Get out!" I screamed, feeling completely unhinged. I could no longer tell what was real and what was my mind playing tricks on me. I stumbled to the kitchen, seeking the sharp edge of a knife. I needed to feel safe, even just a little. With the knife gripped tightly in my hand, I faced the door once more, ready to defend myself against whatever was coming. My heart raced as I heard the soft footsteps outside again, the unmistakable sound of someone approaching. But this time it was accompanied by a voice, a soft, almost playful whisper that echoed through the darkness. "Let me in, sweetheart. I just want to see you," he called, his tone mocking and taunting. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end as I fought the urge to scream. I couldn't let him in. I wouldn't. But as I stood there, knife in hand, my resolve began to waver. What if this was all in my head? What if I was truly losing my mind? With a surge of adrenaline, I decided to take action. I approached the door, knife ready, every instinct screaming at me to run. I fumbled with the lock, but just I was about to swing it open, a sudden crash echoed through the back of the house. My heart raced as I whirled around, knife raised, ready to fight whatever was coming. The door swung open, revealing the chaos that lay beyond. It wasn't just the man from the festival. It was a group of children, all dressed in costumes, laughing and shouting as they rushed into the house. "Trick or treat!" they squealed, their innocent faces lit up with joy, completely unaware of the darkness that had enveloped my mind. For a moment, I was caught off guard, my grip on reality faltering as I stood frozen in place, the knife wavering in my hand. I could hardly comprehend the scene unfolding before me. But then I saw him again, lurking just outside the door, watching me with that same vacant stare. My heart sank as I realized the truth. He had been using the children to lure me out, to weaken my resolve. The fear surged back with a vengeance, tightening its grip around my chest. I rushed to slam the door, but the children pushed their way inside, oblivious to the danger lurking just beyond the threshold. I felt my sanity teetering on the edge as I fought against the chaos that threatened to engulf me. "Get back," I yelled, desperation flooding my voice. "You can't be here." But the children just giggled, too caught up in their excitement to understand. I stumbled back, feeling trapped in a nightmare of my own making. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the living room as the man stepped into the light, his silhouette looming over the children. They gasped, finally registering his presence, and I felt a surge of panic. "Run!" I screamed, lunging toward the children to push them back toward the door. "Get out now!" But before I could reach them, he moved closer, and I felt the air grow thick with tension. The shadows twisted around him, forming a wall of darkness that swallowed the room whole. As the children shrieked in fear, I felt the world around me begin to unravel. Everything I had feared was coming to life, and I was helpless to stop it. With the knife still clutched tightly in my hand, I faced the man, ready to protect the children at all costs. "Leave them alone," I shouted, my voice trembling but resolute. "This is my home." He chuckled softly, a sound that sent chills racing down my spine. "Your home? Or is it merely a cage you've built around yourself?" The shadows writhed at his feet, reaching out toward me. I felt their icy tendrils grazing my skin, threatening to pull me into their dark embrace. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, trying to mask the quiver in my voice. "I want to play," he replied, stepping closer, his eyes glinting with an unsettling hunger. "But you have to let go of your fear. Only then can we truly be free." I clenched the knife tighter, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. "I won't let you take me." As I said those words, the lights flickered again, casting strange shadows that danced across the walls. I could feel the children huddled behind me, their innocence a fragile shield against the darkness threatening to engulf us. In that moment, I realized something. The fear that had paralyzed me for so long had given him power. I had to confront my demons, to reclaim my space. Drawing on every ounce of courage, I took a step forward, knife raised, my voice strong. "You don't belong here," I shouted, feeling a surge of defiance course through me. The man's laughter echoed, but I could sense the uncertainty beneath it. The shadows recoiled, pulling back as if they feared my newfound strength. You think you can stop me? I don't have to stop you, I replied, my voice steady. I just have to refuse to let you in. With that, I turned my back to him, positioning myself protectively in front of the children. The darkness felt less suffocating, the air lighter as I faced the chaos. Run, I urged the kids, guiding them toward the door. Get to safety. As they dashed past me, I felt the man's presence falter, the shadows hesitating as they struggled to reclaim their hold on the room. I knew he was losing power, and with every step the children took away from him, I felt my own fear begin to dissolve. Just as I was about to follow them, I caught a glimpse of his face, twisted in anger. You can't escape this, he roared, but I simply shook my head. I'm not afraid anymore, I said, a sense of clarity washing over me. With a final, determined thrust, I flung open the door and pushed the children outside. They stumbled into the moonlight, eyes wide with confusion and fear. But as they turned to look back, I could see their trust in me reflected in their faces. I stepped out behind them, ready to face whatever he had in store. But to my astonishment, the man was gone. The shadows receded into the night, leaving only silence in their wake. I stood there, breathless and trembling, feeling a mix of relief and disbelief. Had I truly banished him? The children, wide-eyed, clung to each other, glancing nervously at the empty doorway. What was that? One of them asked, trembling. Just a bad dream, I replied, kneeling down to meet their gaze. But it's over now. You're safe. As they began to relax, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. I had faced my fears, and in doing so, I had found strength I didn't know I possessed. As the Halloween night air chilled around us, I realized that while the shadows may always linger, they no longer held the power to control me. I had reclaimed my home, my peace, and my life, and perhaps, just perhaps, I would be able to face whatever haunted me next. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more spine-tingling tales, make sure to support the channel by subscribing. Don't forget to check out all our other videos for more thrilling and haunting stories.